is the Beef. We know how tough it is to be an entrepreneur today. We're giving small business owners a platform to share their story. You'll hear it all, the highs and the lows, the good and the bad, but most importantly, you'll learn. Welcome to the Beef. The Beef.
Oh yeah, what's up everybody? It's your host, John Kelly, aka John the Marketer, for another episode of the Beef Podcast. Welcome back to another week. In the studio today, I've got Kelly Violette with the Tomball Economic Development Corporation. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I know, and that is my word right there. Every single episode I say, I'm so excited for this episode, and here's why. We've had a lot of businesses on. We've had some 501c3s on, but we've never had anyone who has an impact on the business community, whether it's in the city of Tomball or nationwide, because we've had guests from all over. But economic development corporations are so important, and I can't wait to jump into that today. But we always start off with an icebreaker question. So our icebreaker question today is, what time of day is your favorite?
Oh, probably about 5 p.m. for multiple reasons. 5 o'clock somewhere, but not only for that. It's like that glow, and it's. I remember being picked up as a kid from practice or whatever, and I'd be sitting in the back, and of course we didn't have phones, so we'd look out the window, and I remember it would be about the 5 o'clock time frame, and that was when the sun was going down. And I remember thinking, something about that time of day, I felt more at peace. And to this day, I call myself a midday gal. I'm not a morning person.
Amen.
I have to force myself to really get moving in the morning. Like I really do. And I've been that way my entire life. But my brain really, I think, in the afternoon is when it really comes alive. And I'm not a late night owl or anything like that, but I'll just stick with I'm a midday gal.
Yeah, it's the golden hour in photography.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful time. That sunset, like you said, everything kind of wrapped in that soft yellowish, goldish, very beautiful color. For me, I'm kind of with you there. I would say mid-afternoon though, maybe a little bit before 5. First of all, it's always 5 o'clock somewhere, so I'm good with that. But honestly, for me, it's a lot of the same reasons. I don't like waking up in the morning. I'm not a morning person. So when we have an early meeting or, a networking breakfast or something of that sort, I'm lucky to make it there. Yeah. I hate waking up, and it doesn't matter what time of the day I wake up. I don't like waking up.
Yeah.
I just like being asleep. So I feel like I'm engaged somewhere around this time, 2 p.m., currently. I know the listeners don't know what time it is right now for us, but around 2 p.m., man, I feel like I'm really just kicked into high gear and I'm ready to go. I am more of a late owl. I stay up, pretty late every single night working on something, because it's just, if I don't work on it immediately, I'm going to forget about it.
Yeah.
And so I might send an email off at midnight sometimes, because I'm like, all right, I'm thinking about it now, so let me send this email.
I think there's a bunch of us like that.
Yep.
And it's funny because you get to know the patterns of, okay, so-and-so's up because they're cranking out emails and they're trying to get caught up. And I'm like, that'll probably be me tomorrow.
I tell people all the time with Beefy Marketing and OMG Event Co., I'm like, if you have something you need to ask or something you want to say, send the email, because you might be surprised and get an email back at midnight. You never know.
Yep.
And if I'm asleep, I'm not going to hear it, and I'm going to be asleep. So.
Yeah, exactly. But at least you have a record of it, because if somebody tells me something, even if I think it's a great idea and I'm trying to store it, there's so much going on, just between work and home, that if I don't write it down or put it in my phone, it's likely gonna be gone.
I'm 100% with you. I mean, it's good. It means we're busy.
Yep.
And if we weren't busy, then we'd be broke and bored. And
in my profession, when you don't have activity, that's a bad sign.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, the reason we're here, though, before we jump into the EDC stuff, I like to just kind of find out about the person and what drove you to lead the EDC the way that you do and get into that business. So where'd you come from? Just tell us all about you.
So I was born in Riverside, California. Don't hold that against me. You can't choose where you're born. But I grew up in a little small community right outside of Riverside. And Riverside's kind of like the county seat of that area. And it has a lot of history there. Agriculture is a huge industry there. They have orange groves. And so there are some similarities as far as how I grew up and some of the things that I love about Tomball, and the agricultural side is one of them. But it really was a great place to grow up. And I loved living there until I was, I don't know, probably mid-year through high school. And it was like everything just changed rapidly. I mean, you talk about the effects of growth in a community that didn't plan for it. And that's what we experienced. And it's interesting because as a kid, I used to play like SimCity.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like my game. And it's funny because my dad would always say, "Are you going to grow up and build a city? What are you going to do?" And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. And that's just kind of the way my brain naturally, I think, has always worked, even though I didn't recognize it when I was younger. But when we had so much growth, and it was Riverside County was, it's kind of on the outskirts of Los Angeles County and San Diego County.
Okay.
And so it's considered the Inland Empire. And there's, you've got great access to the mountains, to the beach, to pretty much anything you want. But when we had this uptick in growth, and I mean, it seemed like within a year's time, there were subdivisions getting built overnight. And, it was a lot of growth that the city wasn't prepared for, the schools weren't prepared for. So we went to, half of our classes were in portable trailers most of the time with portable restrooms and, that type of thing. And it was just, I think the whole community was unprepared.
Right.
And that I think experiencing that and kind of, the effects of what can happen when you are in a community that, is just kind of run over by growth. And I was always kind of interested in just local stuff. And so for me, it was really a matter of trying to find my niche. And like most people, let's be honest, economic development was not on my brain. I didn't even know what the heck it was.
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
Like, I want to grow up one day and run
be an
the
economic
EDC.
developer. It's like, you what? I still went on my applications for different stuff, I'm like, it's job title, economic executive director.
What do I say? Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny because what we do is so broad. But yeah, I mean, most people don't know what it is. I didn't know what it was. When I went off to college, I had no clue. And my first year of college, I actually went to New York. So that experience of, kind of seeing West Coast, East Coast, the cultural differences and whatnot. I mean, never thought that I would have ended up in the middle of the country in Texas. But I feel like this is where I was born to be.
It's honestly not just because I live here. And I mean, we moved here into the city recently in the area the past decade. But I moved here because I really do thoroughly enjoy the city and the people in it. We have such an awesome infrastructure here. Of course, improvements are needed everywhere. No matter what city you visit, no matter how well prepared they are for growth or for development, anything, there's always things we can improve on. But for the most part, I would say the city of Tomball is doing extremely well currently. And that was one thing that my wife and I landed on when we were looking for somewhere to live. It was like, we know we want out of Harris County, but if we're going to stay, we can settle with the city of Tomball, and not settle on the city, but settle with remaining in the county. We were definitely looking, we wanted to go like Montgomery County, Waller County, somewhere a little more country. But I do feel like Tomball, with our unprecedented growth, you still have that small town feel.
Yeah.
And it's like such an amazing
own little
place.
bubble. And it's funny. It's, I get asked that, how would you describe Tomball? What's the greatest thing about Tomball? And, I mean, really, it is the people. But there's this kind of intrinsic, I can't say the word.
Intrinsic?
just a thing,
right?
Whether there's a cultural thing, whether it's a value thing, it's here, and you feel it when you come here. And even as an outsider, I mean, somebody coming from Southern California, where most people are like, "Whoa, how did you end up in Tomball, Texas?"
Yeah.
You know, I mean, honestly, I really do feel like this. I've never felt at home until being here.
I think there's somewhere in that LA region, there's a sign that says you must move to Tomball, Texas, because I know of off the top of my head, counting you 3 transplants that were all high up in city government here from that area. So it's kind of strange. It's like,
and very unrelated. I mean, I don't
totally different.
But
I've been to California, and now not the county sides of California, but LA. And it was like walking to an entirely different country.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's just unreal. And not just because we were crazy and visited Skid Row, but even in, you know, like Hollywood and all those surrounding areas, we went and saw an Angels game, and the cultural shock is so different. Yeah. But you see the similarities between Houston and LA, but then it's just, I don't know how to explain it. There is just definitely a difference in culture.
Yes.
And you see it with New York City as well.
Oh, yes.
Been there and done
anywhere. The same. Even other smaller towns. It's funny because I have friends that live in the Woodlands, and when they come over and we meet for dinner, or you know, I have 2 daughters. They're 13 and 16, and so you know, a lot of times they're over or they're friends, and it's funny to me now because I've been here so long that you know it's normal. But even my friends that you know live in the Woodlands, they're like, wow, the kids here are so polite. and I love hearing that, you know, I really do, because you look at that generation and I think they get so much flack.
Oh, absolutely.
And still there's that, you know, there is that positive, that value, that cultural, you know, inheritance, if you will, of what's important and how, you know, you treat people. And I just love that about this community. I just do. I mean, it's funny because I've been here now 15 years working in Tomball.
Right.
And I never thought, you know, when I landed here that I would stay this long. I mean, I'm not one to job hop, but really it doesn't feel like a job.
Right.
You know, I mean, and I think that's the one thing I really do love about economic development is, you know, it kind of combines some of the stuff that I've done in my past with planning, because I was the city planner, and in Riverside after I graduated college, I was an associate planner there. So kind of that urban planning, the Sim City type of thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's really in my background, but when you're a planner, a lot of times, you know, you're either doing enforcement, so you're doing review of plans, you're doing, you know, pre-development meetings, and you're kind of going through the codes, and this is what you can do, and this is what you can't do, and it's always a challenge because, you know, you feel like the bad guy a lot of the time, and it's a hard position
in the middle.
To be in. I mean, the community development department of the city, it's a very challenging position to be in, and the other side to planning is the long-range planning. It's, you know, looking 20 years out. And that is where I really just love that field because, you know, you get to kind of envision beyond what's there now and what could be and how you make those things happen. Because, you know, road projects, drainage projects, infrastructure projects in general take a long time. I mean, the planning, the right-of-way acquisition, the design, all of that is years and years and years. And so things that, like right now that you're seeing that are occurring in Tomball, they are part of, you know, this effort that has been ongoing for many, many years.
And that's if there's no disagreement from a citizen or a council member or the mayor or, because, you know, you're right. There have been projects that pop up and I hear about it. And then it's like, okay, well, 3 years later, they had that one meeting. Where did that project go? Why have we not heard anything? And it's, well, something delayed it. So now it's on the back burner again, getting all this stuff squared away. And then we'll be back at it shortly.
Yeah.
Now we've kind of danced around by talking about these topics. And let me preface this with, I had no idea. So if you're listening right now and you're like, what are these people talking about? I've never heard of EDC. I've never heard of Economic Development Corporation until I came to work for the city. And really, my wife came to work for the city in the finance department, someone that y'all kind of work alongside to kind of, accomplish some tasks with both agencies, yours and the city. I had no idea what an EDC was. I had no clue. And then all of a sudden, after finding out what it was, when Andrew talked about bringing Beefy to the city, I said, well, we have to go off of Quinn Road and stop in and talk to the EDC and the chamber. If you're going to bring Beefy to the city of Tomball, we can't leave this area and start making any business deals or location deals without talking to these people. So break it down like I'm an elementary school kid and tell me, what is the Economic Development Corporation? What do y'all do? And why are all these things we've talked about so important in your mission?
So I'm going to go just layman's terms because, there's the International Economic Development Council's definition of what economic development is and blah, blah, blah. Hands down, I would say it's making our communities awesome. It's trying to improve the quality of life for the communities and the people that live there and work there and spend money there. And the basis of it essentially is bringing in employers. So what they consider primary employment, and that's a lot of your distribution, your industrial, your corporate headquarters, manufacturing type, scientific research, lab facilities, those types of things. And the idea is that's your base economy, right? So if you have good jobs, then in theory, and until we've seen, the effects of workforce after COVID, but if you have good jobs and good employment centers, then you can bring people there. Right. Once you bring people, you get rooftops. Once you get rooftops, then you get the secondary jobs and secondary benefits being the service and the retail.
Right.
And so to me, that's the easiest way I can actually break down the idea of economic development. And so there's a wide variety of ways different communities do economic development. It's very dependent upon the community. And I think, like economic development is at different levels. You've got our level, which is local. You've got regional levels, which would be like Greater Houston Partnership. You've got the state's Office of Economic Development and Tourism. And then, the U.S. has, their Economic Development Agency and all that. So you've got different levels. What I love is the local side because you really get to, for me, I'm combining that planning background of, being able to kind of, see what fits where and what makes the most sense and how all that works together. But instead of, doing those plans and hoping that at some point it comes to fruition, 20 years down the road, in economic development, and I think partly because I do have the benefit of having the planning background, but in economic development, you get to see those things happen and not only see it, but you get to help make it happen. And that is, to me, the coolest job that anybody could have. I tell people I've got the best job in Tomball because I really feel like I do.
I love your analogy of like, it is like playing SimCity, but live. You're not the mayor, you're not council, but you're an integral part of building the forward movement, the progress that happens in the city. I mean, all of those pieces are equal. We're not taking away, EDC doesn't take anything away from the mayor's office or council or city management or planning or zoning or any of that stuff.
Right.
But it's definitely a big piece. I mean, because what I know y'all for the most is what we've worked with you for at Beefy, and that's grants and money available to attract businesses, to create jobs, to create other customers for those retail locations. And you're right. I mean, I was just watching a documentary last night. I say last night, this morning when I finally went to bed, and it was talking about a 1979 disaster that happened at a nuclear plant I think it was in Pennsylvania is where it was. And that's exactly what they said was, and this resonates to me, is when the nuclear plant moved in, we thought, wow, this is so great. Over 200 new jobs are created. And you're right. Without having those large companies and manufacturing plants and some of the scientific research places I've seen in the city, without having all of those jobs created, you don't have an interest to bring people in, and without people, you 100% can't have the retail side. You can't have the restaurants and all of that stuff. Because just talking to my cousin who just opened a restaurant, he's like, hey, if I'm going to move a location to Tomball, I want to know that there's good infrastructure there, not only homes, but I want people like from the hospital who are going to come to us on lunch break, and from plants that are going to come to us on lunch break, or students and faculty from Lone Star College or the high school, or, all of those things are important. So it just really popped out when you said that, of how important the EDC is as a puzzle piece with all of those other pieces.
And most of the time, we're like the worker bees, we're behind the scenes. What we do is, hopefully for the most part, not political, right? So we try very hard to make sure that the projects that we work on are in line with our strategic work plan and in line with the council's comprehensive plan and their strategic plan. And so if you really look at, like you were saying, I mean, it's everything has to work together, and it is really a comprehensive effort. And I think that's one thing that Tomball has done so right over, the past decade and a half. And that's been, really, I think the impetus of that was finally, kind of creating this, let's envision our future, versus growth happening to us. Let's see what we can do if we plan for growth happening for us.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, what what we were able to do with the comprehensive plan in 2009, which was our first comp plan. And that whole process was phenomenal, because it not only brought up ideas. That was where the farmers market idea really was born.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
And that we were able to kind of set the stage and the tone for this community to start really planning and controlling at least, where they wanted to go. Because before that, there weren't really the opportunities. The zoning process and the planning process was fairly limited. I mean, you had the public hearings, but most of it was on plats and that type of thing. There were no rezonings. There were no public hearings on, Board of Adjustments or variance cases, those types of things. And so that process, kind of created this whole different culture and voice for the community. And it has been so cool to see that evolve. But it's a comprehensive approach. And kind of what came out of that was, okay, everybody, here's your part, right? Mm-hmm. So, the city started, especially like with downtown, the city started, okay, let's work on marketing efforts. Let's hire, a marketing director. That was one piece of the puzzle. Let's get, public parking lots and identify, some of these areas where we can, capture, highest and best use, and provide for parking and accessibility to these businesses. And, things like the impact fee waivers that we did, way back when. I say we, because I've been on the city side, right. EDC side, I kind of just lump it all together.
Absolutely.
And the waivers on, parking for downtown. All those kinds of things were very clearly a comprehensive approach to encourage investment, encourage development, and to be able to see the fruits of that labor in really a pretty short amount of time. That's been awesome. And then to work on projects like the Baker Hughes Western Hemisphere Education Center and landing a project like that, where
that was a mind-blowing
2012. When we met with them, that was when
huge facility.
Yeah. And they were, coming to us and we're like, okay, because Baker Hughes just took over BJ Services at that time. And
right.
then that, for us, major employer. And you think, the example that you gave, think about when if that employer shuts down, then you've got the other side of economic development, which is the impact to the community. How do you backfill that?
Mm-hmm.
What are the trends? Is that technology that they were using, is that industry even viable anymore? And I think the smart economic developers are always looking in that direction, always looking at what's next and how do we continue to not just grow, but have a balance.
Right.
And I think that's really the key is balance. And when balance gets out of whack in a community, because either you have, too much growth of one industry and you don't have the balance in the capacity, like your infrastructure and whatnot to deal with it, then things get out of whack. And so, when you have that balanced plan, which I feel like Tomball has done a really good job of, especially considering we were, a 100-plus-year-old city that had developed without zoning and planning. And to be able to transform, some of the areas and generate the projects that we have, like Baker Hughes, like the Lovett deal with Macy's, which is, 900,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Our business and technology park. I mean, putting in the infrastructure to set the stage for, what was to come, even though we didn't have a future tenant. I mean, it's being able to take smart, calculated risks that are going to benefit the community. And I think the other side to that I just love is, so for instance, a project that we're working on in Old Town. It's our South Live Oak development. And it's about 7 acres. It's to the east of the railroad tracks. There's 2 buildings there now. They're tilt wall buildings. And, it was close to the railroad tracks, so it made sense at the time. But as we, continue to encourage reinvestment and redevelopment of downtown, an industrial use like that really is not super compatible for a downtown area.
Right.
Especially when you have access off of Main Street. And Main Street is, the improvements are coming and, you don't want those big trucks and all the rocks.
God.
And
yeah.
So, the idea of finding suitable locations and helping to facilitate those changes and those moves. But this South Live Oak project. So, a developer could have bought that and did a facelift and turned it into, office space or, retail space or whatever it may be. And I think for the most part, they're courteous and conscious of the community and being, a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit that we have in what we get to do, and not all the economic development organizations are that way, but the benefit that we have in what we get to do is that we really get to look at and develop something that is going to be a long-lasting catalyst project that's going to have a huge benefit on the community. And we can design it not for what's going to generate the profit, but what's going to generate the lasting character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, that is such a fun thing to be a part of. You can tell I love my job, obviously.
But people have to, because, it's something, again, the very first question I had when I ever heard EDC was, what is it? So we need someone that's passionate about it, because we've got to get that word out there. And I assume that the EDC, besides government policies and what's already been there before, is what attracts businesses to most cities. But what is it about Tomball that makes it special, that is somewhere that someone needs to come set up shop?
Well, there's a ton of things. We talked about the character and the people. One of the unique things as far as EDCs, not all communities have EDCs. And EDCs are set up in different ways across the country, across the state. We're considered, and I'm just going to kind of break it down so people understand the structure. So we're a nonprofit economic development corporation. We're considered kind of a component unit of the city because our funding is through city sales tax. And how that came about is in 1994, there were several citizens that realized that other communities in Texas were taking advantage of this new economic development tax. It was part of the 1979 Economic Development Act. And so communities started putting out to vote, whether or not the voters wanted, or the residents wanted, this economic development tax, which was essentially, you could do up to a 0.5-cent sales tax.
Right.
And those funds then could be used for infrastructure projects. So roads, sewer, drainage, helping to attract new businesses, those types of things. when they started seeing that communities were taking advantage, not taking advantage, but they were utilizing that
properly.
Yes, and starting to see progress. And so there were some founding members, and I have one still on my board that stepped up and was very visionary and said, hey, I think we need to do that in Tomball. And so it ended up on the ballot and it got approved. So there is a 0.5 cent sales tax that's added on to the city. And so you can only, you got an 8.25% total. 6% goes to the state. 6.25% goes to the state. 2% goes to the local municipality. So you're capped at the 2%. We are a quarter of that. And then the city gets the other portion of it. And they do another 0.5 cent for property tax reduction. So when you get your property tax bill, if you look down, you'll see property tax reduction. That's based on essentially like a subsidy of the sales tax going to help keep that property tax low. So we are a very sales tax dependent community.
Absolutely. It was something that I know all of us felt during COVID because there was such a scare of, well, with all these shutdowns and with everything that's happening, because we're so sales tax dependent, it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to literally cut back on everything.
Yeah.
And I know from everything that I saw, we were extremely lucky in the way it was like, okay, all of the doomsday predictions that we should have had, everything was wrong. And we're actually doing better. And so would you attribute that to all of the prep work that we've kind of put into it? Like, how did we get through a pandemic and come out better ahead of time versus a lot of cities were already, I don't want to say wasting money. I'm not wasting money, but it seemed like they're so far behind, yet the city of Tomball is such a great city financially with our budgeting and everything else. So how did we survive that pandemic, both on the EDC side and whatever from the city operation?
I think it goes back to kind of the spirit of this community and the connectedness. So if you look at kind of the structure of our community, right? You've got city council, you got city government, you've got some of these major employers, and then you've got a very active chamber, you've got an economic development organization, you've got really strong educational partners. When all of those players are at the table and they work well together, you have this synergy. And I'll tell you, during the pandemic, during hurricanes, during whatever disaster it may be, we all have each other's phone numbers and everybody's texting because it's, okay, hey, we just found out, there's a family that has been displaced and they need somewhere. And so, I'm texting the mayor and the mayor's, on the phone getting, them situated. I mean, that's how things happen in Tomball. And I think, part of that is a very, concerted effort to make sure that we are all working together for that common goal. Because at the end of the day, we want our community to be, a thriving, vibrant, sustainable community. And you see, the flip side of that, and you see that around us. I mean, there's a lot of communities around us that are still doing well, but there's a lot of towns, especially smaller towns, that the old towns have, or the downtowns have just kind of slowly, lost, tenant after tenant, and you go, oh, what a shame. The architecture is so pretty.
Oh, I know.
And you drive through there, and it's the same thing. If you don't invest in your own community, how can you expect businesses to invest? How can you expect people to, want to come and build their lives there? You know? And so I think, it goes back to that, the relationships that are built here in Tomball. And that is really, I think, what helped get us all through the pandemic, through, the disasters that we've been through, and really, it creates this bond that at, like the city leadership level, when I bring a prospect in that's from, let's say, an international prospect, it's so great to be able to have that personal connection. And it means so much to them to meet the city manager, to meet the mayor, to, have the president of the college in those meetings and to be accessible. And I think that more than anything is that connectedness and accessibility is one of the things that really sets Tomball apart from other communities.
Yeah. And just going on what you touched on there about, it's all good. Going what you touched on there about that old town feel, I've always enjoyed spring because it's like you've got Splash Town and, major dealerships and major restaurants and really cool stuff to do right off of 45.
Yep.
But then when you go right off of 45, you head into Old Town Spring and there's always something cool going on there. And Tomball has a very similar feel to that where Old Town Tomball, it's got that very Main Street, Americana, USA, Main Street feel. And you've got the festivals that happen annually and all these big events that happen all the time. And then going back to the industrial park we talked about, on the firefighter side, going into places and getting to do some of these inspections to see like what they're doing for fire safety and helping us pre-plan on how we would attack a fire if there was a fire in that facility. I've seen some of the really cool stuff y'all have going in over there on the business and technology side with some really cool chemical stuff and oil and petrol and, all of these things that are going on over there. So tell us more about like the future development for that, because I've seen a mixture between, manufacturing plants and like food, I guess, manufacturing or, and then Paradigm Brewery, this really cool brewery that you can go to and play cornhole and drink and eat and all this stuff. So just tell us a lot about that project and why it's so exciting for Tomball. I'm just curious myself, honestly.
And it goes back to balance, right? I think especially in the Houston region that, in the 80s was so energy dependent and when you have an industry that's hit, it affects, especially in a kind of a clustered area, it affects those communities so hard. And so as a planner, as an economic developer, the idea of sustainability and balance and you want to cluster your industries because that does create a synergy,
right?
But you need a balance of other industries so that as things change and as technology improves and, other things become outdated, you still you're not losing all of your tenants in your park, or you're not,
Not to interrupt, but we've seen that where, you have this big oil boom and a gold rush of oil, right? And then they go in, they create this whole town, this whole infrastructure, and the city's built around oil.
Yep.
And then what happens when that well runs dry? Both literally and figuratively.
Right.
When the well runs dry, now it's a ghost town.
Exactly.
Everybody left versus here, you're going to have more. And not just Tomball. I mean, this is, nationwide. Hopefully we've got a plan to that aspect. I mean, interrupt. Just
no.
Immediately that comes to me. Ghost towns.
And honestly, you think about it. It's funny because the term economic development, it sounds like so foreign, but it really is something that every individual experiences in your daily life. I mean, you think about, you go down Main Street and you see, oh, there's a new business going in. I wonder what that is. Or they've demoed so and so, and I wonder what's going in there. I mean, it's all of those kinds of things that are really a part of what we do. But the business park is a perfect example. I mean, that's what we did back in 2011 was we bought the 100 acres, and then we started the process of the environmental cleanup and design and planning for kind of a mix of uses. And it was a challenge on many fronts at that point. First and foremost with the board of directors, because I was a brand new executive director. I mean,
coming in with all these ideas.
Yes, my very first meeting, I think I was hired at the end of February, and my very first meeting was in May, I believe. And so it was like, hey, here I am. I'm going to pitch this, and I think we really need to do this. And by the way, we're not going to make any money on it for a while.
Surprise.
Yep. And if kind of our makeup of the board, most of them are business owners. Most of them are very, conscientious of spending and return. And so, it was kind of a change in that way of thinking of, in the past, I think there was, the mentality was we want to keep the taxes low. We want to, keep our citizens happy and maintain what we've got. But when we started really looking at the future, back in 2007 and 2008, when we started kind of all these planning studies and working with our Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is HGAC, and they started looking at the projections, it was very clear that it was coming our way. And the Grand Parkway obviously expedited that tremendously. But for us, the timing and the idea of the park, it was really, planting that seed, knowing that we're not going to see those immediate fruits. It's going to be a while. And, to do something like that as a public kind of nonprofit organization, it's risky. And when you don't have a tenant and you don't have, a layout, we wanted to keep it flexible because we didn't know where we're going to get, a 50-acre user, were we going to get, 10 5-acre users? I mean, no clue. And so we really had to be flexible and maneuver. And I think that has suited us very, very well in the park because we've been able to attract companies like Packers Plus, which is an oil and gas firm. We've got Suez, which is, they are a state-of-the-art lab.
It's an amazing. I've been all through that place.
Isn't it fantastic? It's
I hope
phenomenal.
a fire never happens there because what they do is just, it's honestly beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
Like I can't even understand all of the testing. They just sit there and tell us about it. And I'm like, I'm paying attention and I'm trying to understand, but it's like they're speaking a whole nother language. It's a really cool spot.
It is. And you think about it, it's so cool because they can do they can test any kind of liquid and, then you get the synergy of like Paradigm Brewery. And it's like, hey, if you're needing to do any of your testing, there's somebody in the park that can do it. And so then they're like, oh, well, we were going to use so-and-so, but they're out of the city. And so let's do, so creating connections, building relationships, I think is key for us. But the park has been just, kind of a labor of love. It really has been.
What a risky move for you too.
Yeah.
Not only just being new and coming in with such a proposal that, like you said, a lot of business people would maybe look at and just look from a financial standpoint and say, oh, we're not going to do a whole lot of movement in 10 years and it's going to take some time to get something. But what if it didn't work out?
Right.
You're coming in with this idea and it's like, holy crap, this better work because this is my first idea the first couple of months. That's crazy. But it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's been a huge success. Yeah.
We got one lot left. It's 18 acres and that's because we bought some property back from one of the businesses that they had a much larger plan and because of the downturn, they decided not to move forward with that. So we have one 18-acre tract left. We worked with the city to extend South Persimmon North and Medical Complex. So that was another huge win.
Yes.
Getting that connectivity. And we've been so fortunate in this area to have the investments in the roadways and the network that we have. And to be able to, in a really relatively short amount of time, see projects like the Grand Parkway and 249.
Yep.
I'm sure growing up, you heard, and saw the signs, stop the Grand Parkway and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And now, think about, I always chuckle when I'm on, a toll road because, as you kind of manage growth, you know that things like that have to occur. You've got to have capacity in your roads. You've got to have capacity in your infrastructure. And, the cost of putting that in now is so exorbitant that you've got to be creative in funding mechanisms. And, when you see the gridlock on the feeder and I'm like, I'll take that toll any day.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's funny. My wife and I were just going to Main Event, another big, company that came in, and we were headed to Main Event. And for some reason, when I took the left off of Holderreath Road onto the feeder road of 249, I jumped on the tollway. And she was like, "You're really going to take the tollway for," and then she stopped. She's going to say for a couple of exits and look down to the right. And it was just gridlocked almost all the way back up to that on-ramp. And she was like, "Oh, never mind. All right, you're good."
That's the interchange construction.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, I'll gladly pay that.
Yeah.
And, going forward with that, I mean, it is kind of a necessary evil, because not that the roads are evil, but it's just not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
We all love that small town feel and 2-lane roads and farm to market roads. But growing up in this area all my life and seeing back when 249 was just that, and 290 was just that, just 2 separate 2-lane spots all the way from Houston to Tomball or Waller or, wherever you were going. It almost sucks to see, all of these concrete jungle highways going over, but it has to happen because while we want to have that old town feel, and I appreciate Main Street and I love it and cherish it, and I always want it to be that way, we know that around us, we have to have some progress too.
Right.
Because if we don't, we're just going to die off.
Yeah.
And instead of being a nice, large city that has an old town feel, but progress, it would just be that old community that, where I grew up, I kind of feel like that city is stuck a little bit, and nothing, I don't want to badmouth anybody, leadership or anything there. I love that city and I love the people that are there. I grew up with them,
mm-hmm.
but they should be moved along more like Tomball by this point. And I am so happy to live here because of organizations just like you, just like our city. It truly does make it a really nice place to live. So how do we support the EDC? How do we get involved? If you can, both with the city of Tomball and because we do have nationwide listeners,
mm-hmm.
How do they get involved in the planning and development in their city or their community? And then specifically, what can we do to support the EDC here in Tomball as well?
Yeah. So, for anybody that's interested in getting involved in planning or community development within their community or want to know what's going on, really the first, kind of information source is going to be the website. So if you're in a city, go to your community development department website of the city. If you're in a county or an unincorporated area, then you'd want to go to the county. And usually the counties have either an economic development site or community development site. We're fortunate here in Tomball because we do have an economic development organization. The counties don't have the ability to have a funding source like we do for economic development organizations. So, but if somebody is interested in getting involved here locally, there are so many different resources from the city app that, was launched, I guess, last year now.
Mm-hmm.
And what with our organization, we meet every other month. So when I say we're kind of behind the scenes,
very behind the scenes,
we are, because a lot of these projects take months and months. I've had projects take a couple of years to get done, but we are really connected and involved, through events with the chamber, through events with the city. We support, the Shop Local initiative. We help fund those types of things. We work with our, local businesses. One of the biggest things I think that people have taken advantage of and are still learning about, and it's hard to reach everybody, but our business improvement grant program.
Yes.
The facade grants, the sign grants, the property improvement grants, and now with Old Town having a separate facade improvement grant where if they're doing a substantial improvement to the exterior, they can also qualify for improvements for ADA accessibility, electrical, plumbing, structural upgrades, those types of things, because downtown is it's a challenge. It's a different animal than the rest of the city. But our website, our Facebook page, our Instagram page, we're active on all of those. Our website was just updated last year, and I get compliments on that all the time. It really is neat, because what we did was we wanted to make sure that the pictures on there were all true representations of Tomball. And so if you go on there, you're going to see, people down the street that that, are working in different shops. And then we have success stories on there. So different businesses that had different challenges, either through COVID or, prior, after. So we've identified them and different success stories. As far as what we offer, the grants and the incentives are one part of it. I think more than anything, the businesses, when they work with us, they have a guide, right? They have somebody to help kind of get them through, because a lot of business owners, especially, startups, entrepreneurs, you have this great idea, you've worked it out to the best of your ability, but then all of a sudden it's a whole nother task of going through the process of creating, your physical space. And that's an area where most people are so overwhelmed.
I can imagine.
And so, helping through that development process, helping, through the relocation process, helping them through the expansion process, that is a huge part of what we do. And so, for companies that are interested in, what opportunities are there, it's I think economic development, because of there's a connotation like, oh, it's got to be this big project. It's got to be the Macy's,
Yeah.
And, we work, our grants, our projects, our businesses are all sizes. I mean, we do grants that are, couple $100, couple $1,000, depending upon what it is, between a rental incentive, to go into a vacant space, between the improvement grants, our project grants. I mean, there's pretty much something for everybody in there if they're wanting to improve, their business or expand their business. So that's an added benefit of being in Tomball, because we are a small community. Most economic development organizations, when you have the size of kind of trade area that we have,
right,
most economic development organizations don't have that ability to do some of the things that we can do, like the retail, the quality of life projects. Once you get to, say, 20,000 population, that goes away, and then it becomes more your primary jobs. And so we have that unique advantage in Tomball of being able to really be a driver of economic development, but do some community development type activities too.
Yeah, it's my old philosophy is basically, I'm going to make you tell me no. So as a business owner, when you come into the city, I think that you should absolutely approach all of those organizations and say, hey, what can you do for me? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. But if you never asked, the answer is no.
Right.
So it's
right.
like you said, you may think as a business owner, oh, you know what, they're not going to want to talk to me. But I mean, we got a new sign, and it was through help with the EDC. Mm-hmm. And, it's not free handouts. It's not free candy, but it's definitely incentives for you to do those improvements.
Right.
And a company like us, you wouldn't think, like you said, we're walking in with 6-7 full-time employees, and then, contractors. We're not a 200 job,
right,
huge company that's bringing a big industry here. We're just a little marketing agency, a boutique agency that's got some great clients, but mm-hmm. we're not a huge multi-million-dollar company yet, mm-hmm. and y'all were willing to step in and help, and the money's there. You got to ask,
right? Right.
So
absolutely. And beyond that, I mean, that gives you a sense as a business that you're welcome in this community.
Absolutely.
And I think that, even if the grant is a small grant, you leave with a sense of we've got support here.
Yep.
And that's, you don't find that in every community. I mean, like I said, yeah. we've got that kind of special advantage of being able to work with such a broad range of projects. And that's what makes my job so incredibly awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about like the huge tax incentives and tax breaks that large corporations get because of the impact they're going to have. But as a small business owner, it's so easy to feel like, you're just another mm-hmm. another person or another business, and it's like, yeah, you don't have a big impact. We don't care about you.
Right.
But somewhere like Tomball, and hopefully in another city with a great EDC or something, similar to that. Hopefully they have that feel too, where it's like, no, every single business here has a part in what goes on here. I mean, right. We get invited to meetings with the chamber, the EDC, the city, to where it's like, no, we're going to meet as a governmental agency. We're going to meet with these business owners and see what we can do to help them and help our citizens. It's not just, we're citizens too. Even if we don't live here,
right?
We're still citizens Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, or whenever our business is open. It's just we're here to conduct business.
Right.
So.
Well, and you're a stakeholder. I mean, and
that's the best way to put it.
The reality is you've got stakeholders that whether they live here, work here, people that come here that, spend money in our shops, I mean, they're stakeholders. And part of that whole kind of community development process really is getting to know what your stakeholders want and what they don't want. And I think that's really important for all planners, economic developers, those that work in city government, is really understand and be flexible with your community. And I think, Tomball has done a fantastic job of that, and being not just reactive to events, but really taking charge of what we want and what we could be and how to get there in a realistic manner.
Absolutely. Well, I know I've learned a lot today, and I hope that the listeners have learned a lot today about who y'all are and what y'all do. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything else you need to get out there into the world?
I do want to mention, so we are working with the city and our partners on upgrades to 3 alleys in downtown. And we met this morning with our landscape architect, and we got to see the renderings. And, it's funny, you think of alleyways as like just these dirty, kind of utilitarian roads that don't really serve any purpose. And the idea of kind of going back to, the vision and seeing things for what they could be, and kind of taking advantage of that. The revitalization of these alleys into more pedestrian-friendly environments will help encourage businesses that want to open up, maybe access to the back and have, space out there. The design of them is absolutely amazing. I love it. And it's realistic. It's not this pie in the sky, super lofty, expensive design. It's realistic, and it's Tomball. And I think the community is going to be really excited when we get to, finally unveil kind of the pretty part of the plan. We've been working on the engineering, and the engineering is all, nobody thinks that's sexy or fun. It's like, okay, you've got a plan and a profile. What does that mean? But when you get to show, the reality through images of what things could be, that's when you start seeing people's minds, click on, and they start going, oh, I never looked at that way. We could do that over here. And so really, I think it's a matter of, with these alleyways, changing maybe the mindset of what they could be used for, because we look at them as an economic opportunity.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for telling us about you and being on the show today. I can't thank you enough. We love getting to know people who impact businesses, business owners, all that kind of stuff. So it truly was a pleasure to have you on the show today, and I just can't thank you enough for stopping by.
It's been awesome to be here. Thank you.
Listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Beef. As always, every single week, I'm your host, John Kelly, aka John the Marketer on Instagram, and YouTube subscribers. Those that are watching us on YouTube right now, thank you for not only tuning in, but watching this as well. We can't thank y'all enough. If you've got somebody that needs to be on the show, whether it's a business owner, or somebody who affects businesses like the EDC or the city or a surrounding county. It doesn't matter if you're in California, if you're in New York, or if you're in Texas, we want to have you on the show. So please continue to like, rate, subscribe, all of that stuff for us. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Share us with your friends and family. We'd love to have more listeners, but of course, refer anyone that you want to hear on the show to tell their story. We'd love to feature them. So that's it. That's another week, another episode. I'm out of here.
You've been listening to The Beef. Thanks for listening. Make sure to like, rate, and review. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information that you can use. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, follow us on social media. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Beefy Marketing. Would you like your business featured on The Beef? Know a business that should be featured? Visit beefymarketing.com/thebeef. Remember, branding is about a connection with you and your people. Till next time, thanks for listening to The Beef.